Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving headfirst into the world of Ludus Merge Arena, a game where strategy meets PvP in the most epic way possible. If you're like me and love to outsmart your opponents with the perfect blend of heroes, but don't have hours to test every unit in the game, you're in the right place. I've done the hard work for you so you don't have to waste time figuring out which heroes are worth your gold and which are just, well, let's say bench warmers. In this video, I'm breaking down the absolute best heroes in Ludus Merge Arena. We'll go over which characters will help you climb the ranks and which ones might leave you stuck in bronze. So grab your favorite snack, get comfy, and let's get into this tier list. You're going to want to hear this before your next match. I'm quickly moving on to the video and I'm ranking characters in Ludus Merge Arena. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of tier list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching.
My friends, only 0.1% of viewers subscribe. If you like this type of content, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance for your support.
First, let's start with non-legendary characters. I made a separate tier list for legendary characters in the rest of the video. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Axe Thrower, Viking, Plague Doctor, and Cannoneer. Alright, let's dive into the C tier non-legendaries in Ludus Merge Arena. Let's be real, the Axe Thrower has seen better days. His ability's damage is on the low side, and he's basically a magnet for minions. Up against units like Slime, he ends up wasting his attacks on the endless minion spam. If you're thinking of using him, maybe think twice. He's kind of like the Vikings. And speaking of them, they might just take the crown for the worst unit in the game. Their buff pattern is all over the place, and that 30% damage boost they offer, almost pointless. It's like giving a rusty sword a shiny polish. Looks nice, but still not gonna do much. Now the Plague Doctor, he's got that vibe going for him, dealing some solid damage. But let's face it, in a world full of better DPS units with actual utility, he's just not the top pick. Cannoneer, on the other hand, does have some strong points. His AoE attack and high base damage are nothing to scoff at. But here's the kicker. If your enemies aren't conveniently grouped together, most rare units will outshine him every single time. So yeah, these C tier units might have some quirks and moments to shine, but they're far from the game changers you'd hope for. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Crystallix, Samurai, Executioner, Shaman, Huntress, Fairy, Arachne, and Saboteur. Alright, so let's dive into some of the best non-legendary characters in Merge Arena. We're focusing on those solid B tier units that pack a punch, but maybe don't quite hit the top of the charts. First up, we have Crystallix. Now, Crystallix is a decent choice if you're looking for someone who can stun enemies. Always handy in those sticky situations. But, let's be honest, when it comes to tanking, he just doesn't measure up to our guy, Minotaur. Think of him as your backup tank, the if all else fails kind of guy. Then, there's the Samurai. Now, Samurai is your early game MVP, a solid DPS with some self-regen that keeps him in the fight longer than most. But here's the kicker, Vampire is just better. I mean, Samurai's cool and all, but when you're comparing them side by side, you get Vampire much earlier, and Vampire's versatility just outshines Samurai every time. So, Samurai, great in the beginning, but he's like that friend who's awesome for a while, but eventually, you meet someone who just gets you a little more. Speaking of units that get things done, let's talk about Executioner. This guy brings the fear, literally. His fear ability can change the course of a round when used right, and his damage, through the roof. But there's a catch. There's always a catch, right? Why use Executioner when you have Electric Mage or Warlock? They're just better at what he does, making Executioner feel like that one friend who always insists on bringing a knife to a magic duel. Great intentions, wrong tool. Finally, let's give some love to Fairy and Arachne. Now, Fairy, she's a healing queen, and when paired with the totem, you've got a team that's practically invulnerable, especially if you manage to super merge two of them in a game. It's like having a personal medic on the battlefield. And then, there's Arachne. She's the sneaky one who poisons enemies over a large area, slows them down, and drops their damage output by a whopping 30%. If you like playing the long game, Arachne is your gal. She makes your healers look like heroes by stretching those fights just a little longer. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Franken, Jester, Slime, Totem, Crusader, Trickster, and Gorgon. Alright, let's dive into some of the most interesting A-tier non-legendary characters in Merge Arena, and trust me, there are some absolute gems here. Let's kick things off with Franken. This guy is like the Swiss Army knife of your squad. He's got a little bit of everything. He can poison enemies, soak up damage, dish out some decent hits, and even heal himself. His buff pattern is pretty slick too, so he's always adding value. Franken's versatility makes him a solid pick in almost any situation, especially when you need someone who can cover multiple roles. Now, Jester is a fun one. She brings a lot to the table with her ability to taunt enemies, which can be a game changer in keeping your backline safe. Plus, she deals respectable damage herself. However, there's no sugarcoating it. Bastion does her job a bit better overall. Still, if you're looking for a reliable A-tier pick and Bastion isn't available, Jester can be a solid second choice, especially when you want to mess with your opponent's targeting. Next up, we've got Slime, and let me tell you, this squishy dude is seriously underrated. Just a notch below the powerhouse Minotaur, Slime's spawns are absolute champs at soaking up damage, especially against those pesky electric mages. And don't sleep on Slime's damage output either, it's surprisingly solid. He's the kind of unit that just gets things done, quietly but effectively. Plus, watching him multiply and overwhelm the enemy is just so satisfying. And we can't forget about Totem. This guy is all about boosting your team's damage output. If your units have high attack speed, Totem turns them into rapid firing machines. His buff pattern is also super efficient, coming in as the second best among all rare units. He's a fantastic pick if you want to lean into a high DPS strategy. Plus, there's something just cool about having this mystical totem on the battlefield, amplifying everything around it. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Bastion, Electric Mage, Genie, Minotaur, Warlock, and Vampire. Alright, so let's dive into the non-legendaries in Ludus Merge Arena that punch way above their weight class. First up, we have Bastion. This guy is an absolute must-have for the early game. Seriously, he's got tanking down to a science. With his ability to soak up damage and taunt enemies, he's like the ultimate bodyguard who keeps the baddies away from your squishier units. You might even find yourself sticking with him over some legendaries just because he's that good at his job. Plus, who doesn't love a unit that can carry you through those tricky early battles? Then, let's talk about the unsung heroes like the Electric Mage and Genie. The Electric Mage? This dude is your go-to for insane damage output before you manage to snag a legendary DPS. Not only does he deal massive damage, but he also stuns enemies, which is super handy when you're trying to control the battlefield. And Genie, oh boy, if you're looking for a top tier support unit, look no further. Genie brings the best buff pattern among all epics, heals like there's no tomorrow, and even restores energy. You might not believe it, but this guy often outshines legendaries in the support department. Now, don't sleep on Minotaur, Warlock, and Vampire either. Minotaur's buffs are insanely useful, especially when you're just starting. His stun can completely shift the tide of battle. Meanwhile, Warlock brings a fear factor to the table. Literally, he can shut down 2 enemies for a couple of seconds, and with every ally that falls, he gains energy. Pair him up with Slime and you're looking at a killer duo. Last but not least, we have Vampire, the ultimate backline disruptor. This guy can teleport behind enemy lines and tear them apart, all while regenerating health like crazy. If you want a unit that can swing rounds in your favor single-handedly, Vampire is your man. Now let's move on to the list of legendary characters. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Druid, Buddy, Mr. Grey, and Witch Doctor. Alright, let's talk about some of the D tier legendaries in Merge Arena. Now I know what you're thinking, D tier? Are we really going there? But hey, sometimes it's fun to chat about the underdogs, right? First up, we've got Druid. This guy is supposed to be a support, but let's be real, he's barely holding it together. Sure, he's got some poison going for him, which can be nice in a deck that's all about that sweet damage overtime, but outside of that niche, he's struggling to find his place. Kind of like that one friend who only shows up to game night when you're playing trivia, useful, but only in very specific situations. Then, there's Buddy. Sounds friendly, right? Well, Buddy is great at dishing out some single target damage, but here's the catch: he crumbles when minions start showing up. And let's face it, minions are basically everywhere in Merge Arena. He's like a cat trying to catch a laser pointer. Cute to watch, but ultimately, he's never really gonna catch it. As for Mr. Grey, he might have been a star if heals were the go-to meta, but since they're not, he's sitting on the sidelines like an unused bench warmer. And poor Witch Doctor, where do I even start? As a summoner, he's just not cutting it, and his buffs are all over the place like a broken vending machine. So, if you're looking for a game changer, these legendaries probably won't make the cut, unless you're trying to make a point by losing stylishly. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Valkyrie, Gunflower, Rocky, Snoozemander, Mimic, Paladin, and Little Red Cap. Alright Merge Arena fans, let's dive into the C tier legendaries, the unsung heroes of the game. These characters might not be the first ones you'd think to grab, but with the right strategy, they can still pack quite a punch. Let's start with Valkyrie. She's a bit of a wild card, and honestly, her ability is all about RNG. If her buff lands on your tank, well, you're out of luck. But if it hits someone like Duckwing, oh boy, it's one of the best buffs you can get in the game. So, if you're feeling lucky, Valkyrie might just be your girl. Then, we've got Gunflower. Now, Gunflower's buff pattern is kind of all over the place. It's like trying to guess what mood your cat will be in after a nap. But hey, she makes up for it with solid DPS and can even stun enemies if they're already slowed by her vines. A little chaotic, a little unpredictable, but still has some utility if you're willing to take a chance. Moving on to Snoozemander, whose buff pattern is actually awesome. If only his skill wasn't so situational. If your team focuses on the backline, his skill is pretty much a dud, but if not, he can really shine with the right setup. Snoozemander is like that friend who's incredible at one specific thing. Get them in their zone and they'll do wonders. So there you have it folks. The C tier gang might not always get the glory, but with the right moves, they can still play a crucial role in your battles. It's all about knowing when to use them and how to make the most of their unique abilities. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Gambler, Angel, Boris, Succubus, Treant, Imp, Fencer, Gunslinger, Lich, Gearhead, and Mummy Warrior. Alright, let's dive into some of the B tier legends in Merge Arena that you might come across while you're duking it out in the game. These characters are not the cream of the crop, but they definitely have some unique perks that can make or break your game depending on the situation. So, let's talk about what makes these B tier legends tick and when you might want to bring them into your lineup. First up, we have Gambler. Now, Gambler's a bit of a mixed bag. His buff pattern? Kinda mediocre, I'll be honest. Sometimes his ability can feel like it's sabotaging you instead of helping. But don't count him out just yet. He has one of the best perks in the game, and that alone can make him worth considering. He's like that wildcard friend who either makes the party legendary or a total disaster. Risky, but fun. Moving on, we have Angel. Angel is fantastic for those early game pushes. His buff pattern is pretty sweet too, helping to stabilize your lineup when the damage isn't too high yet. However, when the game gets intense and the damage starts spiking, his healing starts to feel like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. Still, he's great for the beginning and mid-game, so don't completely sleep on him. Now, let's talk about Succubus, one of the most interesting picks in this tier. Her charm ability is absolutely killer. It's one of the best debuffs around, often turning the tide of a fight when you least expect it. Plus, she's got a nice buff pattern to boot. If you love chaos and want to mess with your opponent's strategy, Succubus is your gal. Trust me, when her charm goes off, you'll be laughing while your opponent is scrambling. Then there's Treant. Think of Treant as your solid, dependable frontline guy who's all about those stuns. He can lock enemies down for several seconds, giving your DPS characters time to do their thing. His buff pattern is nice, but here's the kicker. Right now, the tech golem slightly outshines him as a tank. Still, if you're looking for a sturdy wall with some utility, Treant isn't a bad choice. And finally, let's give a shout out to Imp. Imp is the perfect counter to mage supports and can disable their buffs, which is super handy when you're up against those pesky healers or buffer units. Plus, he has the neat trick of increasing damage taken by enemies, making it easier for your DPS heroes to clean up. Imp's all about turning the tables on those high support teams, and while he might not always be a must-have, he can be a game changer in the right matchups. So, while these B-tier legends might not be the headliners of Merge Arena, they certainly have their moments to shine. Keep them in your back pocket and you might just find the perfect opportunity to unleash their potential. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Aqua, Nightmare, Jelly Knight, Tech Golem, Lava Girl, Mako, Monkey King, Brewmaster, Popstar, and Evil Eye. Alright, let's dive into some of the A-tier legendaries in Ludus Merge Arena. These characters may not be the absolute cream of the crop, but they definitely bring some serious heat to your lineup. So if you're looking to mix things up and experiment with new strategies, these might be the perfect fit for your team. First up, we have Aqua, who might not be the strongest support unit on the roster, but with the right positioning, she can be a game changer. Aqua pairs beautifully with fast attackers like Firestarter, providing the extra juice to keep your front lines pushing forward. But remember, her effectiveness relies heavily on your strategic placements. Get it right, and she'll reward you handsomely. Then, there's Nightmare, the sneaky assassin with a flair for causing chaos in the enemy's backline. If you've been using Kitsune, you'll find a lot to love here. Nightmare can fear multiple enemies at once, creating a ripple effect of panic among your opponent's ranks. There's nothing quite like watching your enemies scatter in confusion while you take control of the battlefield. Let's not forget Tech Golem, an anti-melee powerhouse that excels at shutting down the enemy's melee offense. Even though the current meta favors a no-tank strategy, Tech Golem still holds his ground with an impressive buff pattern. And hey, getting him early in the game means you can start countering those pesky melee units right off the bat. And for all the damage dealers out there, Lava Girl is an absolute blast, literally. She pairs incredibly well with Draco for a devastating burn combo that melts away single targets like butter on a hot skillet. If you're looking for some serious firepower, Lava Girl should definitely be on your radar. But hey, not everyone has to be about raw power, right? Popstar might be a bit unreliable, but when she shines, she really shines. Her ability to flip a losing round into a win is nothing short of miraculous. Sure, she might not always be the safest bet, but when you want to add a bit of flair and unpredictability to your game, Popstar is your go-to gal. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Draco, Duckwing, Kitsune, Griffin, Muerta, Firestarter, Witch, and Pirate Queen. Alright, let's dive into the world of Ludus Merge Arena and talk about some of the game's most powerful legendaries. If you're looking to dominate your matches and climb the ranks, these S-tier legendaries are your best friends. Starting off with Draco, the absolute king of AoE damage. This guy's all about taking down enemy minions like they're nothing, clearing the battlefield so your single target damage dealers can focus on those heavy hitters. Draco is the reason your main damage dealers can go straight for the throat without getting distracted by all those pesky small fries. Now, let's talk about Duckwing, and oh boy, where do we even start? This little dude is simply broken in the best way possible. Duckwing boasts probably the highest effective DPS in the entire game, and it doesn't stop there. With his ability to target up to 10 enemies at once, Duckwing is your best bet when facing those minion spamming nightmares like Muerta. He turns the tide of battles faster than you can say quack, and honestly, if you're not using him, you're missing out big time. Speaking of meta picks, Kitsune has been a top choice for a reason. This sneaky fox isn't just about close range damage. She drains enemy energy, silences their regeneration, and even reduces their damage output. Kitsune's got the whole package and has been a staple in top tier strategies for a long time. And let's not forget about Griffin. He's the best assassin in the game right now, dishing out insane damage, stunning his enemies, and cutting their damage by 60%. Oh, and did I mention he's immune to crowd control? Yeah, Griffin is like a nightmare that just keeps on giving. Finally, we have the big guns like Muerta, who's basically everywhere in the top player rosters thanks to her incredible buff pattern and unmatched summons, or the Firestarter, with that unstoppable single target damage and sustainability. Super merge a few Firestarters and you're basically unbeatable. And don't overlook Witch and Pirate Queen. Witch can turn enemies into helpless toads, while Pirate Queen brings the pain with damage, crowd control, and summons, all wrapped up with the best buff pattern in the game. Honestly, the Pirate Queen might just be the most overpowered hero in Ludus Merge Arena right now. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.